Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Nurturing Astrology podcast. I'm Dominique Hadamiel, your astrologer and host. I believe astrology can fast track personal growth, improve lives, and empower parents, and also save relationships, families, and marriages. So, on the Nurturing Astrology podcast, I will offer practical guidance for applying astrology to all of these important areas of life. I'll offer insight from my own work, studies, and life experiences, as well as interview experts to bring you stellar wisdom from other professionals to inspire you on your journey. I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait to get started. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Nurturing Astrology podcast and Circle Time Chats with Cornelia Hansen. Hi, Cornelia.
Hi.
How you doing?
Hi, everybody. Oh, good. Everybody's good.
Good. Yeah. It's been a summer. We're trying to get back into some good episodes. And the last one we did was about the missing element and how we kind of end up living that out. Go back and check that episode out if you missed it, because you may have, learned something different about what the missing element really is and how it manifests in the chart, because it's not really missing, essentially.
Right.
So today we want to dive into the elements in general, a little bit deeper. So we want to talk about, how we use them to determine temperament, which is the foundation of Cornelia's work. And we have her book here, Kidwheels, where she wrote Understanding the Child in the Chart and created this entire process for determining temperament and through the 9 components of temperament through child development. So we want to kind of go into that and talk about the elements in terms of the way they're expressed and how that's observable in behavior. And that's the elements are really an easy way, if you're not an astrologer, if you're a new beginner astrologer or a parent who's new to astrology or doesn't even want to really know or go down the rabbit hole of understanding astrology fully, like you can get immense information and help and guidance and insight into how to nurture your child just by understanding the elemental type.
That's right.
And that beginning of your process in terms of the astrological type and the mood, even like those little things can make all the difference. So we want to kind of dive into those and maybe then even talk about how some of the combinations of elements can manifest and some of the things that you've determined from your work. So,
well, I was going to start off by saying that the reason I started the research is because reading about temperament, I said there were 2 important things. You can observe it and you can measure it. So if you can do those 2 things, then you ought to be able to do a research project to show, because I can measure it and I can observe it. And so I had talented people around me who could help me observe, who were used to observing children and their behavior. And so that was the beginning of the work, because I was taking a psychology class at the same time I was teaching preschool. And what an opportunity when you've got, 43 preschoolers, age 2 to 4, and the mothers are available. You can watch the interaction between the mother and the child, or the father and the child. Most of the time it was the mother, but you can observe their interactions too and see how the child is doing. So taking those 9 components, there was one component I didn't really include in my research because I didn't feel it was necessary, because it only came up in one type. And since that type was so rare, I figured that it wasn't necessary for all children for me to know that is their rhythmicity. Were they getting up every 4 hours to eat, or were there big periods in between where they weren't? So I didn't think that was important, but I did do the major components through observation and measurement. And then I had to come up with kind of like a bell curve to keep track of, okay, what's normal and what's higher and what's lower, what very high or very low, because it makes a big difference whether they fall in the balance thing, because your easy child is going to fall into the middle on just about everything. and much easier to handle. That doesn't mean that there can't be problems,
Right.
but knowing where the child is helps us understand if they have a deficit or if they have an excess, because that's based on the 2,400-year-old idea of humors that the Greeks had about behavior connected to the humors. But we've gone beyond that. They had 4 humors and we have 9 components. So we've got a whole purview of all kinds of types, depending on whether you're, and that makes every child unique. Right. As far as I'm concerned, every child is unique. Nobody's pattern is the same, even twins. Yes. So that's the whole idea, is you can observe it. And even you as a parent, you observe your kid's behavior. You know, oh, well, my kid is so active, I don't know what to do with them half the time. Right. My kid just lies there like a lump. I don't know what to do. So, exactly. You observe it too. You just don't know why.
Exactly. And that's what I always say, like observation is number one, in our assessment. And then astrology can give you the why. Oh, okay. So this can validate what I've observed. And then now that I understand that, where it sort of comes from, or where that, component is, then how do I work with it? And how am I different? And how can I utilize this information and have strategies and tools to help us get along, or help to encourage or deal with that energy that might be different, from my own, or brothers and sisters, parents, the whole thing. And then you have your family dynamic, right? With all of those,
and it was interesting that in my book, I used Hayden and Clara's chart, and these are children I knew, and I did their charts at birth, and each of them are temperamentally totally different. And so the parents were prepared for the first child was shy and how to deal with him. And the other one, who was more outgoing, but she had difficulties with anger. And then she showed that a lot when she was frustrated. So they didn't quite know how to deal with her, but they learned what to do. Yeah. So knowledge gives you power in the sense that you know what to do with it. You're not just trying to outguess everybody, or picking up parenting books and telling you, you do this with all children. That's the other thing. The one shape fits all, but it's not true. Yeah. You have different children in the family. If you have different temperaments, then one of them is the odd man out. Yeah. And he suffers because of that, because nobody understands him.
Yeah. I remember that reading. I had Joseph's chart, and I kind of knew a little bit about it, but I would read things and go, well, that's not him, and he's this way. And then the more I learned about the astrology, and then when I learned all about temperament, I was like, oh, boom, like light bulbs went off. And it's just like, oh, then I had real strategies that I could use, know. So it was really, really powerful. So in the process of, delineating, we did a workshop that was like an introduction to understanding temperament in the chart. And we did, create a little astrological worksheet for our participants, and that's still available for replay if you want it. But I'll put the link to this worksheet in the show notes, so people can actually kind of do this themselves. It's a real simple process, and we have it spelled out in the worksheet. But in developing the initial assessment for the astrological type, you kind of created did a little research and created your own model for this, because I know there are a lot of different ways that astrologers or people assess or balance and equate or measure, right? The elements in a chart. So how did you come to yours? Because you give extra sort of credence to the sun sign ruler and the ascendant ruler, as well as just the singular. So tell us how you came up with your.
Right. Well, most astrologers say the sun is the heart of the chart. Right. I look at it a little differently, but it is extremely important, because it's the child's will to be. This is who I am. They present themselves. And we know that most astrologers will tell you that the ego, the sun represents the ego. Okay. And what is the ego? It's the choice we have to make between what we want and what our society allows us to do. So we're constantly under tension. That comes from Freud. But I recognize that ego is not there until it develops, and it develops by going through all the planets. So which planets are it? So when we know at 2 years old, he moves into that Martian period where he's saying, I know, no, I want to do it myself. And he's setting boundaries and you're setting boundaries with him. So it's a whole different stage, but he has to learn boundaries before he goes into the next section, which is Venus, which has to do with learning how to share. And when is it your turn and when is it my turn? And, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something you have to learn to develop your ego. Okay. And of course, you're always dealing with Mercury because you're learning to talk. You're learning concepts. You're learning all kinds of things. The brain is developing as we grow. But we don't get to that ego until the brain is fully developed in our early 20s. So all of those planets have to come in. So I gave them importance according to what I thought was important. Now, the ruler of the chart has always been the important one because they call it the Lord of the chart. It's, he rules everything in the chart. And if that particular planet that rules the chart, say, is a final dispositor, that makes it even more important.
Right. And when you say the ruler of the chart, that's the ascendant sign, the planet that rules the ascendant sign.
Yeah.
Right? So as Cancer rising, the moon.
Planet, yes, right. If you have Aries rising, Mars is your ruler.
Right.
And you also like to look at, I even go deeper than that. I go into the decadence and see what decadence is because there's a subtle nuance to that behavior. And then what house is it in? Okay. I've learned from a lot of things, at least, that the ruler of the chart tells you what you're here for. The house, like my moon rules my Cancer ascendant. It's in the second house. Why is it in the second house? Because my whole life, because my mother died before I was 2, was searching for security. I need to have security, and second house has to do with security, and so does the moon, of course.
Yeah, so, my moon's in the 4th house. I'm also Cancer rising. There's also a quest for security.
Right. Exactly. So it's falling in the 4th house. That gives you a clue.
Yeah, absolutely. So you add credence to, sort of extra points for the sun and also the ascendant and the rulers of those. So that's where I've sort of equated the difference. You'll have the sun sign, the sun ruler, the sign that the sun rules. So if it's Leo, you're basically getting double points there because that's the ruler. And then the ascendant, and then whatever sign the planet that rules the ascendant is in.
Yes, that's important. Points, right? Yeah.
Gotcha.
Then we get to the moon.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's largely about the balance of elements is the core of how you determine temperament. And then you also bring in the qualities of fixed, cardinal, fixed, mutable as the way that those are expressed, essentially, right?
Right. Yeah, we'll get into those in a moment. But if you look at the natural chart, what do we see? Cancer rules the 4th house. This is the nest we're born into. Right. The 1st house, it's okay, I am who I am. And it's developing some sort of identity. Oh, my name is Cornelia. Oh, that's who I am. And then people tell you what you are. So you kind of adopt that persona of what people are telling you are.
Yes. We talked
and then
a lot
you
about
see that
the
next one.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that in our talk about, the first, the polarities of self and other when we did polarity
self and other. Yes.
So that's really another good talk that we did if you haven't seen it. That was really good.
Yeah. So then you get Venus in social relationship. Yeah. And we realize that that's Venus is teaching us how to get along with people and how to share. And our Mercury, so I look at the whole first quadrant as developing the skills related to these planets. It's nice the way it's laid out,
I love it. Yeah. And you said in some people don't even use the outer planets when they assess like the balance.
Some people don't because they feel that they only pertain to a generation. Well,
right. They're generational.
This child is in a generation is going to be affected by it.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. The teenagers are all into certain kinds of music, certain kinds of dress and activities, etc., which is new. And
you include those, but like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto only have sort of 1 point.
Yes.
Right. So you've got, you're trying to get to 100 points essentially in the chart. You give the most credence to the sun ruler, and then the moon, the ascendant, and the ascendant ruler. And then they kind of break down to, 5, 4, 3, and then like 1 point. Right. Ultimately totaling 100.
Right.
And then you're adding up all the fire, all the earth, all the air, all the water, and then all the cardinal, all the fixed, all the mutable. And basically taking the highest of each one, and that becomes your temperamental type. Your temperamental type. Right.
So you take Hayden, he's cardinal water, no matter how you look at it. And his son is cardinal water. But his sister is a Virgo. But when you add up all the elements, she comes out more of a air type, a light Libra type. So Gemini becomes important on her, but so does Venus, because they're very close.
Interesting.
When the numbers are very close, you want to look for nuances of both of them. Then they're, so that becomes more important in her chart, that Venus, because she's root-wise, she's actually a Libra.
Gotcha.
And that's a different kind of personality, because she doesn't show a lot of the Virgo personality.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can.
Libra is much more sociable.
Right. But in your, that's how you get down into the beyond the astrological type, and you get into the other components. You start looking at the balance of those things, and you, like you mentioned, she's a Libra type or an Aries type, and you don't get into the sign, but you do pay attention to that as you start working through, right? Because it's like which kind of fire, right?
I also I try to look for other things that are going to agree with it. You know what I'm saying? If I'm studying one component and I look and I say, oh, well, look, she is a Virgo, but she's an air type, but look at her moon is in Gemini, So you know that the air becomes more important because moon has a lot more points than other things. So you have to find other points in the chart. And if you find somebody like Sarah, who's 50-50 as far as her mood goes, how do I determine which one she's more of? Well, then I look at other things.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's nutshell it. So essentially, when you add up those points, you take the highest of each, and you have, say, cardinal fire, mutable earth, whatever the highest two are. And then you would notice if there's a lack, like if there's a missing element, you realize there's no water, no fire, you would notice that. Or if there's a way overemphasis where you've got 60, 70, 80 points in some particular element or mode, that is not just your high, it's like overemphasis, right? So those are things
overemphasis,
like,
yes.
Yeah.
And so that's the way the Greeks did it too. They said if you lacked an element, that affected you, and if you had an excess of an element, that affected the personality type. So it's the same basic idea, only this has been proven now scientifically.
Got it. So then you go into determining the compatible and what we call compatible and incompatible combinations. So to understand the quality of mood. So your water and earth are compatible, and your air and fire are compatible. So you add up those totals first.
Right.
And whichever one is higher, you have, if water and earth is higher, you have a child who leans more towards the serious side, or negative rather than positive, right? Serious side. And I was thinking, that person who's more serious, maybe more pessimistic or cautious, or those kinds of things, even slow to warm up possibly. And then you have your air and fire, who are typically your easy children and positive attitude, sometimes high energy because you have fire, right?
Right.
So you can kind of get an idea of mood. And then if they're in that balance range, like 35 to 65 in their combination, you've got a neutral or a balanced, elemental child,
Yeah, but
balanced type.
I also look at which end are they at? Like if you're at 35, you're about to go on the low. So you're going to
Right.
be more serious than and if you have fire and it's up to at 65,
Yeah.
then you're going to be more positive. Okay.
Yeah.
So
You're looking
it's
at that bell
always
curve.
conditional. Yeah, it's always conditional. It's important to understand that because we all have moods, but you can observe them in children. Like a good example is my first child was a girl and the second one was a boy. Now the first one was all, of course, I didn't know this at the time. I wasn't an astrologist. I wish I'd known it. But she's all earth and water. She actually comes out like a Cancer type because she's very cardinal, but she's more water. She has a moon, Venus, Mars, all in Pisces.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at that as a child, she was much more serious. She didn't laugh or smile as much. Now, the second one was fire. It was all Aries. And you could see the difference in their behavior. And you could also see when adults would come up to them, that one adult would respond to a more outgoing, happy one than they would to the one who's serious. So understanding that it helps you understand why aren't they paying attention to her? Or you could try to make an adjustment for that. Okay. You could try to make an adjustment for that. But the kid is more sunny and outgoing. He can get away with a lot of things because even if he's highly distractible or whatever it is, it's more acceptable when a kid's in a good mood most of the time. And you find teachers like kids who are good moods.
Yeah.
So obviously they're going to have an easier time. So you have to take that in consideration with those kids who are going to be quiet and serious or fussy.
Right.
They're babies. They're babies. They fuss more and they cry more. And they're slower to be expressing joy. They don't do that in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, like that makes a lot of sense when you say that the happy child is also more acceptable. So like people don't know how to respond to a child that's quiet or more serious or reserved, and you're as a parent's like, come on, say hello, do this. And you try and force them to be social or be happy or be more engaging. And it's just not where they're comfortable. It's not their energy and their level of comfort. And so if a parent knows that, they can make an adjustment, or she's
Yes.
she's shy, or take your time warming up, and not pushing them into a room of friends and to do things. Let them kind of sit back and assess and feel comfortable going and engaging with the other children or playing.
Yes.
And recognizing
child
there's
comes
nothing
up
wrong
and
with your
the
child.
adult comes up and says hello, and the child goes backwards, and tries to hide behind the mother. And then you say to the adult, I'm sorry, she's a little shy and it takes a while for her to get. So if you smile and you're friendly towards her, she'll react in a different way, probably.
Right.
So you have to teach other people.
Yeah. But this is where knowledge is power. And you can also then inform even teachers. When you're asking, your teacher says, oh, is there anything I need to know about little Johnny this year? And it's a perfect opportunity to share a little bit about what you know about their temperament and what you observe, to help the teacher understand how to work with that child, or to help them, with their classmates.
That's why I think every preschool teacher should read my book.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Should go around like in teaching.
Because it was so obvious to me working in preschool how every child was different from one. Yeah. You could see it when they first came in the classroom, which one are going to hang on to mommy and which ones are, oh yeah, what's happening here?
Yeah.
You can see it right away.
Yeah. Now in your class, you kind of share that there's some statistics of like averages of the temperamental types. I think you have like the easy child, the slow to warm up child, the difficult child, even though it should be just sort of like a challenging or more serious child, not necessarily challenging, but serious. It could be shy or reserved. But there's sort of statistics around how, how often that most children are typically easy children. A lot of them are neutral. Like, what are the statistics again around that?
Well, Thomas, Chess, and Birch found in their studies and also in other studies that 40% of children are going to be your easy child.
40%.
Okay. And about 15 to 20% are the shy ones, the ones that don't engage right away and cling to their mothers more, which is also found in animal studies.
Yeah.
And then
it's like 10%.
What was the other one?
The difficult or challenging child. This is like 10%, I think.
Yeah, it's only like 10%. So you're not going to see too many of those. And in between that, you're going to see some children who seem like easy children in many ways because they're adaptable, they're good mood, etc. But they may be extra high in distractibility. And how is that going to affect their behavior? And what can I do to help adjust to it or help the child to understand that that's okay? Or the child's more persistent, then I know I'm going to have some difficulties here setting boundaries with him because he's going to keep nagging for what he wants. So you're prepared for this kind of behavior. And so there are a lot of websites now and a lot of things on temperament. And I found that you can find all kinds of things will tell you about the shy child or the slow to warm up child or the highly distractible child and give you all kinds of tips on how to handle them, which is basically what I do in my books, is say, well, the strategies you need to learn to use, because they found that even the difficult child, there's been a lot of study on the difficult child. So many of them end up in trouble. They end up dropping out of school, getting involved in gangs, getting into trouble, and having poor relationships, etc. That work ethics. But it doesn't have to be, because we found that if the parent is educated and understands they have a difficult child, there are strategies that are going to help you deal with that. So he's going to be more likely to be successful.
Yes.
And so that's what we want.
Yes.
We'd rather see the kid take his persistence and use it in some good rather than becoming a delinquent,
Yes. Yes. And I think it's also important to recognize that, in family dynamics, everyone has their unique temperament. And sometimes there is some element of it that is inherited, Johnny's sort of like dad and, little girls like mom, or the opposite, right? There can be the crossover and some similarities, which you can then utilize to help you. But it's also, you could have a really happy, highly energetic child when that's not your temperament. You are quiet and serious. And then that can feel like a big challenge. That child can feel like a challenge to you because you are not on the same.
Yeah. Can't you ever be quiet? Can't you ever sit still? Go read a book. Can't you just sit quietly and read a book?
Right. No, so it's like you could understand that you could do the worksheet and go, oh, my child is, I know they're a little difficult, but then it's how they might come out as a positive child. And like, why does it feel so difficult? It could be because your temperaments actually kind of are challenging together. If you've got this spectrum of serious and slow moving and, and then you have,
but you're the adult and you have the knowledge and you have the power to change it. Exactly. You can change things. The child can't.
Exactly. That's, I think, the importance of understanding our own temperament. And since we are born with it, and it fundamentally doesn't change, is that is something that you can still know for yourself and recognize you have the ability, you're the one who has the ability to adjust more, and then also offer tools and strategies that can help you, nurture that child the way they want to be nurtured. I have so many parents, when they want to learn about their child's chart, it's like, I want to know what I can do to best nurture my child the way that it suits them or that they need, and ultimately it starts with understanding your own and how that's different from them and how you can make adjustments to help create that environment and nurture who they are, and use strategies and tips to help them, because you have easy children can be easily neglected because they're so easy.
Right. You can stick them in front of a TV and they'll just sit there and watch TV. but that's not good for them either.
Right. And whereas a challenging child can become overwhelming to a parent because they don't know how to handle them. They don't know what kind of outlets to give them. And they can't match the energy. But then those persistent children can pay off in spades when they're adults, if they're nurtured correctly when they're young.
Right.
And I think that's, it's like you have a challenging child, but if you have a strong, driven, forceful, powerful, child, you want to cultivate that in a way that it's really positive for them as an adult, which it can be in terms of finishing what they start, being very successful, and pioneering and creating new things, being the future, leaders, things like this. You want to cultivate that energy. So when we look at the incompatible combinations, they call them incompatible, which is elements that don't go together, you've kind of created like a little word or insight to help understand how those elements go together. And so I wanted to kind of look at the incompatible ones, and when you have a high or a low number in those combinations, how you nurture that. So with air and water,
there are four different incompatibilities.
Yeah.
And so there's four of them. I look at the two highest because they're going to be somewhere there in the presentation of mood. They're like subtle nuances because sometimes they lie dormant and then they come out when stress happens. For instance, you take the fire water. Okay, fire and water, what do they create? Steam. So you get explosions. They can be nice and smiling and warm and friendly, but if they're pushed too far, you can see that kind of explosion. Boom.
So that's
you say, no, you've gone too far. Step back. We use anger to step back. Make the person step back. Then you see they're subject to explosions.
So there's some unpredictability to that combination. If you've got high water and fire, there's a little unpredictability there, and a possibilities for explosion or tantrums or
right. And people who don't get angry a lot, but when they do, they really explode.
Right. You could have an easy child, but then there's still this combination where they could actually have their moments.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
And that's usually when they're stressed or frustrated.
It's interesting. Like when there's stress, you could see that, right?
Yeah.
So it's
quite often,
be able to observe that energy. If you know that you have a child who's high water and fire, and then you see them angry, or when they're under stress, you can see that come out. You're like, oh, that's that.
That's that.
Yes, exactly. And how do I deal with that? Right.
Yes. Like in the book, I deal with Hayden. Hayden is all this water, but he has water and fire. And so he's withdrawn most of the time. Okay. But gradually he gets adjusted, but at the same time, if you're a shy child and the parent goes, get in there and just participating, get in there with the rest of the kids, and finally you push him too far and boom, then you see the explosion. It's like a high-powered steam hose, it just pours out there.
Yeah, so then the identifier is, when you see the child sort of resisting and getting angry, for sure, is to release the push, give some time, step back, and you could potentially avoid the explosion from happening.
Right.
That makes sense. And how about air and water?
That's and water. Dreamer. Well, let's think about Mercury, Gemini. Air is expressive in words or some kind of expression.
Yeah.
And water is imagination and emotion. Now, usually water creates a kind of a mist.
Yes.
Okay. But the thing is that it also creates a person that has a lot of imagination. A person has a lot of dreams. They want to express themselves maybe through the arts in some way.
Yeah.
Or even writing. They have imaginative writing, science writing, science fiction, something like that, because that's an element there too.
Yeah. And when there's a lot of...
And they're dreamers. They're dreamers.
Yes, that's the key word there, is the dreamer. Yeah.
Right.
When you have a lot of, air and water, and there's a lot of dreaminess, and maybe they want to escape when they're under stress or pressure.
Yes.
That's the child that I need to, go snuggle with my stuffy or read one of my books, that's, when they're under stress, that they might want to retreat or do something
Right.
that's soothing, right?
Right. And if a kid's in school and things are boring, he'll just sit and go off into a daydream or a fantasy. Yes, that was me too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then air and earth is more practical. That's mind and matter kind of thing, right?
Yes, that's the expression, but earth, it holds it down. So actually, children with this combination, if it's high enough, they do not show emotion as much. Okay, like Clara, she has earth, where her brother is all Cancer and emotional, willing to show his feelings and shy, etc. She has this attitude of earth air, like my feelings are more important than you. Pay attention to me. But she doesn't get upset by other people's emotions, only about her own. What's affecting me is more important to her than what's affecting you.
Interesting.
So sometimes you can be a little aloof and seem like a little cold because that expression is buried in earth, which is, earthy.
Yeah. So how would they also sort of retreat when they're under stress in some regards, or detach, would you say?
Yes, they're more detached.
Okay.
All I can say about Clara was that she was detached, but because she had a T-square with Mars and Pluto, if she was given a choice, it was squared by her Mercury. If she was given a choice, she could not make a choice. She wanted both exactly the same. I want this one. No, I want that one. No, I want this one. No, I want that one. And so when Daddy went to give her lunch, do you want vanilla yogurt or do you want, strawberry yogurt? I want both of them. It's like, well, you have 5 minutes to choose. And if you can't choose in 5 minutes, I'll choose for you. So it helped her speed up her way of choosing and say, okay, because she would go back and forth so many times before she was satisfied. And if she wasn't, it was like a problem with her brother. I remember the grandmother gave them water tubes, for the pool. And one was a shark and one was something else. And I don't remember. And she looked at both of them and she wanted his.
Yeah.
And then when she got his, she wanted the other one, so it creates a problem.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of kids out there. I've witnessed that,
Yes.
And that's the thing. A lot of this is observable behavior. Like these examples, like we see it,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
you go, oh yeah, that's that dominant air earth right there. I see it, And
and if you ever saw her have a fit, then you would tend to think that she had intense reactions, but she didn't. She very rarely had these temper tantrums, but when she did, it was screaming at the top of her lungs with anger,
Gotcha,
but that's because she had Mars opposite Pluto, so that aloofness suddenly disappears.
Yeah.
And becomes an avalanche,
Yeah. So the last one is earth and fire. So that's the sort of
this one is so so powerful. I just remember working with a mother who had a child who was earth and fire. And I said, oh, he's known as a steamroller type. Oh, that's right. That's exactly, fits him perfectly. Roll over everybody with his enthusiasm and his leadership.
Yeah.
They make great executives because they have all this power that they want to display, so they make good managers, good CEOs. Because that earth helps them and the fire helps them be a leader, and the earth helps them be a good manager. And so that's a powerful combination, but it can be overwhelming to a mother if she's not understanding that. And this mother didn't understand it because her other child was all water, so which was much more sensitive. And of course, they didn't get along because their elements were so different. One boy didn't have any fire, but the boy with all the fire didn't have any water.
Yeah.
So you can learn from those people. They've been put together because they need to learn from each other.
Exactly. That's what I tell my parents when they're very different from their children. I'm like, they're opposites because they're here to teach you about that energy,
Yes.
basically learn from each other, and if your child's missing water and you're all water, guess what? You're here to teach them about, guess what they're gonna, they're lacking water. They're going to be emotional. They're going to need to learn how to handle and manage it. And that's where you come in.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
like divine order.
Yes.
So when you're talking through and you're mentioning, will they have Mars is opposite Pluto, these things, you get into when you start assessing throughout the actual different components, like approach and adaptability. That's where you kind of then hone in on, the aspects like the approach and withdrawal. That can be like, do they enter a room, like you said, go and they're curious, and then otherwise are they a little shyer, and take a little bit more time in their approach, and that's has to do with
You look at the ascendant. Okay. The ascendant has to do with
that enter.
This is my contact with the environment. Okay. And how do I contact, or how do I feel about it? If I'm water and earth, I kind of step back and want to take my time to adjust to it because I'm cautious.
Right.
Okay. If you're fire and air, it's what's going on? Let me get in there and do something.
Yep.
So fire and air acts differently. And then, of course, you have to look at the ruler to see, because that's going to add another nuance.
Right. So
is it going to reinforce it, or is it going to change it? You put Saturn on the ascendant, whatever that sign is, if it's a fire sign, it's going to cool down the fire.
Exactly.
And Jupiter's going to expand it.
Yeah. My niece has that. She's a Leo rising, but she has Saturn and Leo in the first.
Yes.
So very much tempers that. And so yes, you're looking at the ascendant, and then the ruler. Is it the same as that element? Is it different than that element? And then are there planets conjunct that or making aspect to that? Those start to color it, and then you get that total, and then you realize, oh, okay, they're this sort of astrological type, but their approach is balanced, the withdrawal is balanced, or they're like have a high approach and or a low withdraw, or high withdrawal rather, so they're just like slow to enter. And
it's always to something that's first, the first food I eat, the first person I see, the first toy that I get. How do they respond to anything that's brand new? That's their first response. Is it to withdraw and be cautious, or is it to get in and engage?
Gotcha. Great. So that's observable, right?
That's right. Totally that's observable. Yes.
And then the worksheet allows you to measure it. Oh, okay, I see now why. So that's the fascinating thing, is that you can absolutely observe your child's astrology, and their elements and their modes, the way that they express and stuff. So I think it's fascinating that. And then you break down the components to adaptability. And obviously, if you're higher, you're able to adapt. So you can have this like difficult child, but they can adapt really easily. If it's time to chill out, then they can adapt to that,
Yes.
And if they don't, if they're high or low adaptability, then you really have to help them, transition, right? You have to help them be able to.
And you could see that in kids entering preschool. You could see the ones who would cry and hide behind mom, or have a tantrum, or get upset, whereas other children just came in with what's this? And then you have to make adjustments. But the whole idea is that how long does it take the child to adapt? If they have high adaptability, maybe the child is shy at first, but in a couple of days, no problem. Mom drops them off, no problem.
Right.
Okay. But if there's low adaptability, this child can take a few days, weeks. I mean, I've had children that I've seen that took months.
Yeah.
To adapt to situations.
Yeah, we would have.
But so you pair these two together.
Yeah, we would. When I did a mommy and me preschool, and then not mommy and me preschool. I did mommy and me preschool, but I worked for a mommy and me music enrichment program. And then I worked for her. I went to classes for years with Joseph. It was so great, such a great experience. And then I ended up working for her for years. And there was a lot of parents who would email and being like, I want to stop classes because my child isn't enjoying it. My child isn't getting anything out of it. And they were these children who needed a little bit more time
Yes.
to get comfortable, but they were, and my boss would explain to them, they're still feeling the music in their bodies. They're still getting something out of it, even if they just sit and observe, give them a little bit more time, keep going. But a lot of moms would want to just pull them out because they weren't engaged in the class. And so they thought they weren't getting anything out of it. So
Yes,
understanding that,
right.
I think, is really huge for parents.
Yes.
It's okay. There's, there, you can move their hands, they can slowly, get into it. And then maybe there's some kids that after a little bit of time, you realize, okay, let's try a different activity. Maybe this isn't for them. But recognizing if you know that they're slow to warm up, or they have this high withdrawal that they need a little bit more time, then you as a parent will give them that opportunity and time to adjust.
Okay. And also remember that they adjust to the class and they're acting like everybody else. They're engaged. They've made friends. They're playing in all the activities. But then in the following year, they're changed to a different room and they have a different teacher and they have to start the process over again of adapting to the new setup.
Yep.
Because they may have lost some students from the other class and some new ones have come in. So it's all a new situation. It's going to take them time. But the nice thing about it is we know as children grow older, we can help them understand their own temperament.
Yes.
Well, I remember you didn't want to do this. Well, let's try it for a few times. And then if you don't like it, you can drop out.
Yes.
It depends on how long it takes you to adjust to something new.
Yes. Yes.
So that's a nice thing about temperament. We can learn to live with it.
Yeah, right. And then there's the expressions that we talk about, they can be seen in behavior. This distractibility was a big one, and I noticed I learned a lot about that with my son, but it can come in with a lot of mutability. Typically there's distractibility. So there needs to be consistency and helping with follow through, and again, forgetting things all the time, easily distracted. So they can be an easy child, but then easily the distraction can cause,
problems at school.
Yeah.
Because their attention span is shorter.
Yeah.
And they're easily, if they're studying something and somebody walks in the door to give the teacher a message or something, they're immediately aware of what's happening in the environment. They're just sensitive to the environment and they really can't help themselves.
Yeah.
So that's why when they're school age, they should be in a quiet place to study without distractions. You can't do your lunch at the dining room table where everybody's talking and the phone is ringing and the TV's on. They can't concentrate.
Yep.
And then you set up timers. You say, okay, well, work on your math problems for 10 minutes and then you can take a break.
Yes. That was a huge one. Yeah.
That's a huge one. Yeah.
Yeah. When I took your class and I learned that Joseph was had this higher distractibility I knew he was mutable because of the Pisces, but I hadn't learned about the component of temperament that equated mutability to distractibility. But it made a lot of sense that, he needed to do things in short spurts, and then also not having a lot of those extra distractions. And actually that's why when he was in home, at home for homeschool and during COVID and stuff, he actually did well because he didn't have the distraction of his friends, which he was easily distracted in class and wouldn't finish his work,
Right.
But the social part was hard for him, but he definitely did better in class, And then I did realize when there was something he was really interested in, he could be persistent. He a Lego set, forget about it. He's wants to do the whole thing. He has a hard, he'll sit for hours and do it. And that, so it's really can be that if a child has distractibility, they may actually have some persistence where they have really, an interest.
Right. Where they have interest. Yeah. My grandson is like that. He's highly distractible, but if it's something he's interested in, he's glued to it.
Yeah. Then
but it has to have that high level of interest. The biggest word with a highly distractible person is it's boring. It's boring. The teacher's boring. Her voice is boring. Whatever it is, it's boring.
Yeah. So so just little keywords, for parents when they're getting into that, that if there's a lot of mutability, there could be some distractibility there, and then persistence and shyness can be a lot of earth, high energy activity, and excitement, obviously very, self-motivated, a lot of willpower, that's fire. And then obviously extra sensitivities and emotion is water. So those like very observable things. And as you move through, like when you're looking at intensity of reaction, you're looking at, okay, moon and Mars, those things, that emotion and that fire, that water, fire, what aspects are they making to other planets? Or, are Mars and moon connected? Is moon in Aries? These are the kinds of indicators you have in the different components as you go through and assess. So
one of my students was saying that she has a lot of Aries, and it was so repressed. I mean, it just wasn't acceptable in her mother. And I think that her mother, probably because she was an Aries, she probably had the same thing and didn't know how to deal with it because she had learned how to repress it. And so, so she had to learn. It took her a while to understand that fire and how it needed to be expressed, not repressed, because then that's when it tends to come out in explosions.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think this is like a really, priceless way to get some really great insight for understanding the nature of your child and yourself and your children, your husband, to get that sort of elemental family dynamic. And
exactly,
without going into like, oh my gosh, I have to understand every planet, every sign, where the house is, how they're connected. Like it can become daunting and overwhelming quick. And I think especially when you're, for astrologers working with parents of young children, temperament is also a very ethical and safe way to help parents with astrology without trying to predict how they're going to evolve and turn, what kind of person they're going to be, but really just understanding how to nurture their unique nature and create that best fit for them to grow and evolve into who they're meant to be. And also you to do the same, right? As a parent on the journey of parenting, right?
As long as the parent is willing to accept the fact, okay, it's not my fault because he's a steamroller type. This is the way he is. It's not something that I have to change. I'm not responsible for it. That's his behavior. I just have to show him how to use it, how to direct it in a positive way. Right. So that's what you become, is more like a coach.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely. And so we want to, I'm going to drop a link to download the the worksheet for the opening that we did for our workshop and how to assess your astrological worksheet.
You mean this one?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'll share that with them so they can do their own. And if you really want to go deeper into the components, I highly suggest Cornelia's book, because she breaks it down so well and actually gives parenting tips on all the different types and components,
parenting and the strategies.
Styles, parenting strategies. Also, the parental axis we talked about on one of our shows already. She has that in here and goes into those. So it's a priceless resource for a young mom who's into astrology and really wants to understand temperament, or for any astrologer who wants to do child charts. I think it's priceless.
But you can also use it for adults too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I do your whole family. You do your whole family.
You do a whole family. That's right.
Absolutely. So we'll definitely drop that link below. And, definitely let us know what you thought of this episode, what you learned from it. And if you, want us to go deeper on this, remember too, that in the classroom on the website, nurturingastrology.com, you can actually purchase any of the classes that we've done so far. And we're building on all the planets, like Cornelia explained, how each planet is this sort of evolution to creating and building that healthy ego, which is the sun. And in astrology, I always learned that the sun was who we are becoming. We live in the moon and we have all these planetary, essences that we're learning about ourselves to become our highest self, which is the sun and that healthiest ego. And so that will kind of be the culmination as we get to it, is all of these courses are to help you get the foundation of temperament and understand how all of these planets play a role in developing that healthy ego, and how you can be a guide and a coach and a great parent.
Like the 2-year-old is learning about boundaries and how to handle anger. And I like Bruce Scofield's idea of their imprint.
Yes.
Okay. How did I learn to manage my anger? What did my parents do? Well, my mother screamed and threw things, and my father pounded the table. Well, that taught the child how you handle anger. We would like to teach our child not to do those things, hopefully. Yes. And then we're shocked and surprised when the kid is doing it, and because it's reflecting on our own ways of doing things. So you have to learn to accept the fact that that's the way you behave and you're modeling it to your child. And what's another way I could handle this?
Yes.
I know my son had a thing about when he was frustrated, bang on the table. And I said, you're scaring him, and that you have to stop that.
Yeah. I think I remember my mom telling me that she said, she saw me in my room one time talking to my dolls and telling them, you're annoying me. Because that's probably what she was saying to us, you're annoying me. I mean, I'm sure I've said as mom, you're annoying me right now, like stop,
Yes.
But so you have your temperament, but we're all products of our environment. And, we are all models for our children. We learn from what's modeled to us. So there's all these different layers, and that's why understanding witnessing our own behavior, knowing our own temperament, you can, create that healthiest environment you can for your children. And
I think it's important for parents to understand the key thing is a kid is born with this temperament. It's not like he asked for it. Yes. It's there biologically, it's inherited, it's in his DNA. You can learn to work with it, and you can help teach him how to work with it. Yeah. And as you grow older, I mean, I got over my being a slow to warm up child. It took a long time, but I did it. Okay. So you can learn to work with it. I know that I need to have a long time. If I don't have a long time, I will go nuts. I have to have a long time. So, so we learn to live with our temperaments if we understand it.
Yes.
And while I know that I'm slow to adapt, so I tend to live in the same place for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't like moving and having to adjust. I like to know where everything is, and I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Once you become adjusted to something, where you become, adapted to it, you don't want to change it, because then it's like you have to do it all over again. Where's the grocery store? Where's the gas station? Where's the library? I've got to map that all out in my head.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
It's funny. Well, I think this is great. We could probably talk for hours on this topic, and it just go and go. But it is a beautiful, onion, exploration. And it's multifaceted and multi-layered. But again, just wanted to give everyone another, quick chat and some deeper insight into how temperament is determined and Cornelia's approach to it. And, take any questions you guys might have, and stay tuned for more. We have a lot of great shows and talks that we'd like to do. If you have any requests for a topic, please send that in. But thanks, Cornelia, again, for all your wisdom and insight. And
thank you.
I look forward to the next one.
Me too.
All right. See you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.